shield, and we do have, you know, another non-threatening affix to them at the end, but still there's just so much inevitable damage coming up in the dungeon later.
Yeah, I have a bad feeling about this. I feel like No Healer maybe just practiced the first map and just banked on winning it and practiced the third map, and then as they lost, they just picked the map they were practicing with the Shaman. So now they do have a Havoc Demon Hunter instead of, we see a death already here for No Healer, but you can just release and you're gonna be right back. Let's see if they can pull off this pull anyway.
Yeah, but another 5 seconds added to the meter for them there in the end anyway. We already see some kiting coming out of Team No Healer as they drape this huge pull around the corner at the beginning of the dungeon. Of course, that Havoc Demon Hunter has indeed returned. Team CBA in the meantime working on their own pull. We are with Sanguine now as well, so it's really important that you want to move these mobs around. A bit of a heal there on Dual Zac, unfortunately, which has a lot of health. We want to remind everyone at home, of course, that healing from the Sanguine pools on the mobs is percentage health based, so it doesn't really matter how much max HP the mob has. The more they have, the more they're going to heal for in terms of raw number.
Yeah, one thing to note as well is that CBA actually used Bloodlust here on this pull, while No Healer didn't. So maybe No Healer has a bigger pull in mind later on where they're going to pull Bloodlust, or they save it for the first boss.
It's possible. And if I'm not mistaken, yesterday, did they end up skipping what is typically invis at the bottom? I don't think they did, so they're likely to implement some type of similar strategy to yesterday. We'll have to keep an eye on that. CBA now just finishing up that big pull at the start, starting to head over to some of those dog packs, and of course, that fell Bat Rider that's going to fall down upon them that needs to be interrupted for that AoE fear. Yeah,
we actually see CBA is doing quite a big pull here. I think they pulled 2 packs together. Now they don't have, I assume they don't have cooldowns anymore as they used it for the first pull. So let's see how they're going to pull this off.
Yeah, so there indeed comes the Bat Rider. Now we do have to talk about these green bubbles for a moment because they are pretty important. Now they do scale with the damage in the dungeon from the fortified, and they can do a bit of damage while you sit in them. But of course the benefit is you gain 50% haste while standing inside. So, you know, actually for a team like No Healer, they're probably pretty beneficial with the amount of leech going on from some of their characters standing in that bubble and just doing that massive AoE damage. Well done by No Healer, of course, with that double imprison to skip some of that time-consuming trash and moving over to that Bat Rider pack along with the next trash.
Yeah, there's some interesting strats they can pull up with Double Demon Hunter, as the CC they can provide does not actually bring you in combat. We see one dash.
The boss right in front of you towards this kind of fountain area in the middle, so that they have access to the flowers in the fight that spawn near the boss.
Yeah, they also only have one ranged DPS player who can deal with those flowers once they're away. They do have the option to mass grip the flowers in, stun them, and they weed them down, which they probably will do, but as you said, they have to be careful with those Sanguine pulls because they don't disappear immediately.
Yeah, so they have to be careful where they fight. Now, if I'm not mistaken, yesterday they did actually end up pulling the boss to around where they're standing right now. No Healer did. So we'll have to see if they do that again. Now, the flowers do spawn in 2 waves, of course, 2 waves of 5. Each one focuses one of the players in the group, tank and healer included, and should they reach that target, they will explode for a devastating amount of damage. So you do want to make sure that they're CC'd and killed prior to reaching their target.
We see one death here for CBA on the last trash pull before the boss. They should be able to finish it off though and just ras him back up. We see the trash percentage on CBA is actually slightly higher than on No Healer.
Yeah, which is weird because No Healer actually ended up messing up that skip leading up to the second floor here with Agronox as well. Nonetheless, we do see all the flowers slowed well by the D&D. The Warlock's likely helping out with the ring as well, getting a lot of damage in on them. Now, we have to talk about the Succulent Lasher as well. That is an incredibly dangerous mob. It does heavier melee damage on the tank than Agronox himself. The other major danger in the fight for the group, especially without a healer, is that increasing dot damage on the group that stacks up to 5. We can see currently on the screen that they're at 2.
Yeah, so the Succulent Lasher, you actually want to interrupt the cast with either a grip, but I think they have enough interrupts. They have 3 stuns, and they do have a grip, mass grip as well. We see the player on CBA is actually still dead, so it took them a long time to finish off this group before they managed to res him up.
Yeah, but I think it was smart by them to make sure not to waste that battle res. They do get that Failure Detection pylon up. The Demon Hunter comes up right away, and they're also preparing now to pull Agronox. So they're about 8% ahead on trash, but obviously they haven't even pulled Agronox right now, so they have a fair bit of damage to catch up on in terms of that, and presumably No Healer should be outputting a higher amount of DPS on this boss, as they, well, have no healer at the moment, but, you know...
And Bloodlust.
And Bloodlust, exactly. But if Last Dungeon proved, you know, any different, is that Team CBA's single target damage output was really not as bad as you'd think compared to No Healers.
Yeah, that is true. So now we're going to see some skips here going on. Usually the strategy left and right is too inefficient to pull, so most teams tend to skip it.
Agronox now at 70% for Team CBA. They've dealt with some of those flowers already, making sure that they keep him near that central kind of fountain area, making sure as a result that the flowers filter in towards them. They can get that slow ahead of time on them and start DPSing them as they come in. In the meantime, no healer now moving upstairs. Now, there are a lot of pulls upstairs. You know, as soon as they get upstairs, they're going to have to deal with imps on either side of the platform and 2 patrolling imps in the middle. Yesterday, some of the teams decided to pull one of the sides. Yesterday, some of the teams decided to just pull the 2 imps padding and go straight into the room and do a big pull. If I'm not mistaken, no healer ended up pulling the right side of imps. On your screen would be the bottom area, and it looks like they're going to maybe do that again. They do have to pull those, actually pulling everything here, so expect perhaps an AoE grip, or they're saving that for the next room. But really important for those book throwers, right, that you want to CC them, and if they do get a book off, stunning is the answer there.
Yeah, you either want to stun it or, well, they don't have grenades as there's no engineering, there's no profession, so they can't do that. But it's also interesting to note that Sanguine is very difficult here because they do have casts that either need to be interrupted, else they don't move. So if you kill them up too early and you have the Sanguine pull on the floor, as they don't have a druid for a punt or something like that, they do have the mass grip, but usually you want to use the mass grip to actually pull the mobs together at the very start, so you can do more AoE damage and not use it afterwards to pull them out of the Sanguine.
Right, sure. So we're going to see a big pull here, likely with the AoE grip. Oh yeah, there's the AoE grip just at the very end coming in from Team No Healer. So once again, they're going to have to be careful here. They do get that stun off, but they want to make sure the mobs are not CC'd as they're dying because they'll be sitting in Sanguine. Agronox in the meantime for Team CBA. He's going down. He's yelling timber as they finish him off. They'll be going upstairs in just a moment as well. Now, No Healer compared to yesterday, they took these pulls a lot slower. Nonetheless, we do see the building up here again one more time from that Arcanist, and they're going to pull Illisan to the second boss. Why don't you tell us about that, Nagura?
Okay, so this boss is going to be quite difficult for a no-healer team, as it is tyrannical, and this boss has quite a few mechanics that do deal a lot of damage to the group. One of them is a glaive that gets thrown to a random player that does physical damage. It is touchable, but as it is only targeted on range, the Warlock will have to deal with that one, and he will get continuously thrown with this glaive. Then one more ability she does is a Fell Rush that targets 3 different players. Now, most people do a strat where you form a triangle around the boss, and as soon as she starts rushing, you move out together at the same time, so you don't get hit by the blazing trail on the ground. And
here we go with the mage with all those spell seal stacks doing absolutely enormous amount of burst damage, peaking at 23 mil, still going 24, 25. Looks like they've kind of capped off just a bit. Illisana's health absolutely getting obliterated, going down already towards that 50% mark. Yeah, okay, that was quite a bit of damage. I keep comparing it to my hero, the Arcane Mage, yesterday, who just seemed to cap out just a bit higher. Nonetheless, half of the boss's health already gone, nowhere near either that transition phase that Nagura was mentioning earlier. But they do have to now deal with some of the mechanics at this point, of course. The Mage's damage and buff has likely fallen off at this point. We do see the Vanguard come in. We do see that second Arcanist spawn. Now, that Arcanist, much like the one that they're kind of tagging along with them, does cast the same Arcane Blitzes, and they need to be interrupted because that same mob gains the same damage buff and will end up one-shotting some of those players.
Yeah, we actually see here No Healer has 2 deaths. This probably means it's going to be a full wipe. We see the Rogue dying as well. As I said earlier, this is a tyrannical boss with bursting and grievous, and it's just so much damage to deal with without the healer, and yeah, we see a full wipe here. It's going to cost them a lot because they use Bloodlust as well.
Those brutal glaives alone are a huge dot, and then on top of it, you add the grievous stacks with it. I mean, I don't know if they're going to be able to kill this boss. I'm not going to lie. We'll have to see. But they are running back. They did have that kind of cat MC'd, which the DKs in groups often do because they're just extremely dangerous. They jump on the group, AoE the area, and do a huge bleed on them. Likely we'll see them kind of cat-napping, if you will, the cat upstairs again, bringing it around to the boss. In the meantime, of course, Illisana back to her first phase again, casting this Fell Rush, 20% for Team CBA.
Yeah, so I don't think they're gonna have a problem finishing off this boss. They have 3 deaths so far, which is actually kind of impressive because usually in Black Recall, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. You can lose a player here and there, especially with those kind of affixes. So they're having a pretty clean run so far.
Yeah, it's not bad, and you're right, especially the trash. I mean, the trash they just dealt with just has so much residual damage on the surrounding party members, so pretty clean from them. Illisana going down in just a moment, 2% now left. It is worth noting as well that this is now a checkpoint for them. The Mage getting quite low there, barely getting out of his Grievous stack, does proc Cauterize, already at the 4 stack mark, about to stack to 5 in a moment. They all
can take the charge instead.
So I would expect that we don't see the boss live too long here. Of course, we do have the mage representing about 4 DPS in one player. In the meantime, Team No Healer, once again for the third time, rearing up to try and pull Ilisana and get her down. Probably one of the roughest bosses they'll have to deal with this in this dungeon without the healer and with the affixes that currently exist. The mage just skyrocketing above the rogue, who's holding his own too, by the way. I mean, 6 million is not a bad amount of damage. Huge damage coming up on the group. We see that cauterize proc right away. Keep in mind, of course, this is tyrannical, so these bosses are doing a lot of damage with that AoE hit, but Smash Bite already less than 40% now. I mean, this is insane.
It's actually a little bit greedy by the mage, as we saw him proc his cauterize with prolonged power, so maybe he might actually not survive later AoEs, unless the boss dies before that, of course.
Yeah, that's true, so they're gonna have to consider this. Wouldn't be surprised to see something like, okay, so he's okay there. Wouldn't be shocked to see something like a Blessing of Sacrifice come out of the Holy Paladin, make sure that their super mage does not get deleted there. The mage's buff is probably gone at this point, I'm sure, but who cares? The boss is already at 20%, so really shouldn't be a big deal. Of course, real estate on this boss usually becomes a bit of an issue at those higher tyrannical levels, but no problem again. We unfortunately see that Warlock just going down. The Brutal Glaive is just so punishing on this boss, and without a healer plus Grievous, I mean, Warlock or not, you're just not healing through that amount of damage taking on you.
Yeah, it's just so much for the Warlock to deal with. All the Glaives, the Grievous, and he might get a Fell Rush too, and then he has to cut the beam in the intermission phase as well. There's just, all the abilities are on the Warlock, and without the healer, it's just so hard to handle, even if they have a lot of self-healing. It's just too much.
Right, you are. Smash Bite now at 6% for Team CBA. In a moment will be going down, and then they'll be rearing up to pull what I would assume to be the entire stairwell leading up to Dentalian Axe, which is the last boss of the dungeon. In just a moment, the mage ends up going down, but you know what? He's done his due diligence. Who cares? He ended up doing about 80% of the boss damage there. So they do move over, and I would assume here we're going to see. Now, that was fortunate too. It was good timing. He died just at the very end, and we do know that once that boss dies, you do get another checkpoint. This is still with them. Now, we did see a couple of scary moments with this tactic, keeping the Arcanist during the boss. It did kind of break loose at the very end during the Dentalian Axe phase, and, you know, just started kind of wreaking havoc on the party. So they have to make sure they keep that in check during the fight.
Yeah, it's also very good to note that they do have 99% enemy forces, so once they kill this Arcanist, they actually have perfect percentage, and it's nice to see that teams are planning out their routes perfectly so they don't overkill any trash.
And at this point, you know, I wish my good buddy Rich was here, but Team No Healer has been full screened at this point. CBA up on the board completely. They have pulled, they're actually getting ready to pull Kurtalos, which is the first phase of this Dentalian Axe encounter coming up. He's probably just going to melt. The mage is just going to do away with him during the Arcanist buff. Ravencrest is going to go away, and then they have that huge RP. Now, Nagura, there is that extremely vulnerable part of this fight during the especially with Tyrannical, before the players get the buff that we talk about, and he does that AoE Shadow Bolt volley.
Exactly. So there's one buff that gets applied to the whole group in the second phase after a while that increases everyone's HP, everyone's damage, and everyone's healing. Now, the very first Shadow Bolt that the boss does, which is an AoE that hits the whole group, you don't actually have the buff yet. So that means you probably have to use some sort of personal cooldowns or immunities, as it is tyrannical, and it is at 23 dungeons, so the Shadow Bolt is going to do quite a lot of damage.
Everyone should be okay except for the mage, as long as they don't forget to kind of pre-ice block like we saw in that first boss. Should be okay. And if they do die, they got to take that battle res right away. Rogue proccing the cheat death there. This should be all right here in just a moment. We do see, of course, that ice block come up from the mage, as we see do see the debuff from it. Everybody is about to get their buff. They do indeed. Now, I wonder if, you know, you can get pretty fancy with this Arcanist thing. I mean, you can drop the Arcanist to try and spell steal buffs while you're doing that kiting strategy during Dreadlord's Guile, and they go away. Is it worth it? Probably not, unless you're really racing against the clock. But I mean, this is Tyrannical. There's a lot of health on that mob. So imagine.
You're gonna run out of mana.
Yeah, true. Yeah, very true. Unless you time it well with an Evocate. Oh, but then you'd have to still dump your entire mana pool. You're absolutely right. Nonetheless, we do see the Arcanist still MC'd here. You do notice, of course, that the team's at 99%, but that last 1% will be from that Arcanist.
Okay, so there's one other ability that you need to know in this boss fight, which is a swarm that gets casted on a random player. Can also be the tank, which is obviously the best target for the group, as it does stun the target that it's on, and it does a lot of damage, especially coupled with the Shadow Bolt that happens throughout the fight. Oh, the rogue actually dropped
LOH, that was a good LOH.
Yeah, that was a nice reaction time there by the healer.
Yeah, so that lay on hands coming, of course, topping off that rogue. And, you know, these Grievous stacks can get away really quickly, especially with this kind of play on the 300% health buff and healing. I mean, they start to take pretty out of control. That Stinging Swarm, though, is really, really dangerous in Tyrannical setting on top of all that dot. So you want to make sure you kill that immediately. A bit of RNG involved, of course. It could go on the tank, which is obviously the most beneficial, but not always the case. Did they still have the Arc? Yeah, no, so they actually have finished off the Arcanist at this point, at that 100%, and now it's just theirs to take.
Yeah, you can see the healer actually has a lot of things to do as he barely does any damage. You can see if healers don't do damage, that means they're probably healing because of course they're not going to stand there and do nothing at all. So if there's nothing to heal, then they're going to do damage.
Yeah, so indeed, I mean, there's a lot of damage on this fight. You know, this fight scales pretty crazy. You know, it's kind of a joke at some of the lower key levels, not too bad, especially once you outgear it. But the combination of that Grievous plus the Stinging Swarm can make things get pretty out of control pretty quickly, especially with that Shadow Bolt starting to get those Grievous stacks rolling into a Stinging Swarm. I think this is the last kind of transition phase we'll see here. They should be able to hopefully finish off their remaining 30%. But I mean, you know, at this point, Nagura, I mean, you know, I would say I'm fairly confident that CBA is going to win this map, but you know, they did their duty, and I'm sure Rich is gonna, you know, talk about this too, but they just perfectly counterpicked this map.
Yeah, they did a very they made a very good choice in picking this dungeon and the affix too. And I mean, we can't disregard their performance either because they were pretty fast and they only had 6 stuffs, so they had a pretty clean performance here in this dungeon. Yeah, so Dentalianax now going to the last single digit of percents. We do see Team No Healer pop up to say hello one last time, as this is the last time we will likely see them in this tournament. CBA finally downing Dentalianax and finishing it off.